Hello, check 1, 2, check. Checkerino. Just seeing if this is live. Claims it's live, just want to make sure it's live. Might hear some feedback. Checkerino. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, hello folks. Welcome to this impromptu video stream from your host, Professor John. If you are watching this in January of 2026, odds are you are covered in snow, or at least you should know that I am covered in snow. It's just after that big old blizzard, and we've had classes canceled on Monday. I'm stuck out of town, taking a train back on Tuesday, so everything's getting all messed up. So if you have recently had class canceled on account of the weather or my various travel, I really apologize. I know that things are a little wacky right now in terms of what projects we're working on, how we're sort of like getting through the tabletop project. Know that we will be doing for whatever class we are meeting with, right, for both Fordham and for SVA, we will be playtesting our tabletop games in class in our next session. And there might be a little bit of time beyond that to continue to refine things, but as we sort of get ahead in the semester, right, we are starting to transition towards doing our digital game design and development stuff, right? We are kind of concluding our tabletop project, and we are moving in the direction of beginning to design and develop games in the Godot game engine. And so I figured that now would be a good time, as good a time as any, to sort of introduce, or at the very least kind of give a broad sort of overview of the tools that we will be using for this next chunk of time, right? You don't need to watch this immediately, but you're welcome to. This for both of the classes that I teach, this is almost being published a little ahead of schedule. Typically, we get to this maybe in about a week from now, so there's no urgency to watch this, but what I will say is it'll be a very useful resource going forward, so you can start watching it. And I think typically when you're sort of encountering complicated coding concepts and sort of new workflows, it's good to sort of expose yourself to something, watch a little bit of this. It might not make any sense. It might kind of wash entirely over your head. Then you can come back and watch it a few days from now, and you can continue to reference this as a resource going forward, so that you can start to begin to understand how to work in these different environments, right? And as we do this, right, as we begin to start working in our digital game design and development tools, a really good framework for that is the lab assignments, which I have pulled up here, right? And so for both courses, right, I'm looking at the Fordham syllabus, but SVA it's the same. We have these tabletop games that we're working on. We have and we also have these labs that we're now transitioning to, right? And these are these short coding assignments. And I'm just looking at the requirements for Lab 1. And I've designed Lab 1 in a way to be a very gentle introduction to the Godot editor, some of the core concepts of Godot, some of the core concepts of Git and GitHub, which is necessary for sharing our files together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of structure this whole little tutorial around giving you an overview of this particular lab, and then walking through how to actually build out this lab with GitHub and Git and with Godot 4.6. And so this is also a very useful resource, because if you follow along with this tutorial, by the end of it you should be able to turn in and submit something that is effectively your Lab 1 assignment. So again, you don't need to watch this immediately. However, if you're watching this in the future, that's because I'm using it as a sort of a reference point, right, for doing these labs in the future. And this is sort of a really broad overview of these beginning steps that we're going to take in this digital design and development landscape. Okay, so in terms of Lab 1, I'm just going to read through these requirements, right? We want to have a Godot project that has a main scene, 2 different sprites or images, several instances of another scene, like a forest with several trees or rocks, and then a GitHub repository with the project inside of it, and a README where you describe the project. Okay, and this might sound like a lot, right? It might not make a lot of sense at this outset, but that's what the point of this video is, right? We're going to go over all of these different components, and I'll explain to you kind of what is necessary for each of them, right? And again, this is how I grade it, so you can see you get 1 point for submitting anything, 1 point for having a main scene, 1 point for 2 different sprites. two points for having nested scenes and 1 point for submitting it via GitHub. Okay, so the first sort of major component of this, right, we've already started looking at it a lot, right, is this word GitHub, right? We're even looking at this this assignment on the GitHub website, right? So it's a good time to start giving you an overview of Git and GitHub, right? So Git is a version control system. It's a tool that computers use to organize files and track changes over time, right? It's a tool that they use to enable you to make changes to programs, make changes to files, and then edit them and save those changes. And then you can always make new changes, or you can go back in time to previous changes. It's almost like a time machine for your computer, right? It's a great way to sort of keep track of things. And it's also a really great way to work on multiple projects, to have multiple people working on one project simultaneously, right? Typically, when we are collaborating on digital projects, as we will be doing with our video games, we need a really clear way of organizing our files and making sure that everybody has the exact same files on everybody's computer. And Git is the core technology that is sort of underpinning all of that, right? And Git, as a matter of fact, if we just go to, like, you know, git.org, I think. I might have made that up. Yeah, it's not right. Okay, I'm just going to Google Git. No, not GitHub. Okay, Git, G-I-T. And also, apologies for not editing this. I'm doing this kind of live in real time, and I appreciate you bearing with me for this. It's a lot easier for me to conduct these sort of videos in kind of one take, right? But so Git, right, if we go to Git, Git is a free and open source distributed version control system designed to handle everything from small to very large projects with speed and efficiency, right? So Git is kind of the core underlying technology, which is used to track all of the different files and is the underlying version control system, right? And there are lots of different ways to work with Git. And then there is this thing called GitHub, right? And GitHub is kind of like Facebook for Git, okay? So it's a little weird, right? The first thing we need to sort of wrap our heads around is that there is a distinction between a thing called Git and this other thing called GitHub, right? And GitHub is sort of like the Facebook for code, right? GitHub, right? You can even see we have this timeline with like some friends of mine. We can see all the sort of things that they're working on, right? And you can find major repositories or projects hosted by a wide variety of people, right? So we can even find what we were just on was the source code for the Git repository itself, which is kind of wacky, right? Whoops. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Let's see. Can we get to make it a little smaller and go back? Let's see. Right, so this is the repository for the program Git as hosted on GitHub. Okay, that's a little kind of overwhelming, right? But we can also see there's lots of different things, right? So we can find the Godot source code. Right, here's the Godot game engine. Right, this is the actual code that is used to make the Godot game engine. And we can sort of see, here's the sort of all the information about it, right? We also know that we have our class repositories, right? We have this repository for Fordham. We have this repository for SVA, right? And, you know, in both of these cases, right, these are, these are folders of files. These are projects that have lots of code in them. That we have been looking at primarily online so far, right? We've been looking at them in this sort of like on this web page. Yeah, this is a repository that I have. And what is sort of, if we go back to the Lab 1 assignment, right? If we go back to the actual, I'm just going to close a couple tabs because things are getting kind of heated on my computer. If we go back to Lab 1, right, we will see that the criteria are, right, we want to have, we want to submit a repository, right? We want to create a GitHub repository with our Godot project inside, right? And so this is sort of the first major step that we have to take in order to get ourselves oriented with Git and GitHub, right? There are lots of tutorials for how to create GitHub accounts. I'm not really going to go into that at the moment. What I will say is, right, if you were to, let's see, we can make a new, nope. Control-Shift-N. Nope. Command-Shift-N. Well, if you just go to GitHub for the first time, you should see something that is like a login or an account creation profile prompt, right? Follow those steps and create an account. You can do that by entering an email and setting a password, right? And you're going to want to sort of find and create a GitHub account. And once you have a GitHub account, you should have this sort of home page, right? This dashboard. We have this hamburger menu off to the side, which has all of these different sort of places we can go to sort of look at our different things, right? We also have this top bar, right? And we can sort of check out our profile over here. We can set our sort of profile picture and settings, right? You can sort of edit all these things about you. But one of the most important features here is, right, creating a repository itself, right? So if you want to do this first step for the lab of creating a new repository, you're going to want to go to github.com, right? Create an account, and then once you're there and at your home page, you should be able to click Create New, okay? And you can click Create New Repository, right? I'm just going to click on that. And hello. My computer really doesn't like what's happening today. I might need to, let's see, can we do this? Okay, all right. So here we are at our Create Repository page, right? So I'm going to create this new repository. And there's a couple of first steps that we want to take, right? First, you need to specify the owner, right? For most of you, that should just be your profile. Then you're going to want to give it a name, right? So you can call it Lab 1. Or if you want to be really smart, you can even say, like, you know, say Intro to Video Game Design Lab Assignments, right? And you can actually use one repository for all of your lab assignments. And you can just keep updating that repository, and you don't have to create a new repository every time, right? You might want to put your name in here or something, but I'm just going to leave this here for now, right? You can give your repository a description, right? So this is a public-facing description of what is in your repository. So I will call it, you know, my video game design labs, right? And we're going to choose a visibility, and it's really important for these that you make them public. One of the most common things that I see students do is they forget to make them public, or they leave them, right, they set them to private. And if it's private and you don't invite me to your repository, right, then I can't see it and I can't grade it, right? So I really recommend setting it and ensuring that your repository's visibility is set to public. That way you can just send me the link and I can just look at it on the internet, right? Then we're going to say, you know, templates. We don't need to start with a template. I do want you to add a README, okay? A README is sort of like an entry point to your repository, right? If we go back to the, you know, if we go to like one of our class repositories, we'll see that the README, right, is this file right here, right? All of the syllabus text that I've been showing you over and over again in class is just housed within the README file, right? And many repositories, it's sort of a pattern with GitHub repositories to use the README file kind of as like the index, right? Your sort of first entry point to the repository where you have your text, right? So even on private repositories, it's good to have a little README where you sort of say like, oh, this is my homework, or this is what I was thinking about. It's a great place to sort of take notes and to share your project with other people. So I do want you to have a README file, so you want to toggle this on. For gitignore, we should add a gitignore. That's because gitignores are sort of secret files. They're settings that Git has to keep track of hidden files and to basically our computers use all sorts of hidden files with a variety of different programs and operating systems to sort of keep track of things like which folders were open or what files had you loaded. And you don't actually need to synchronize those between computers. And Godot is no different, right? Godot has some files that it uses to help you run it on your computer, but aren't actually relevant to sharing your project with others. And so essentially what that boils down to is when we go to our gitignore, we can click this open and we can search for Godot, G-O-D-O-T, and we'll see that this pulls up a gitignore with specific files to be ignored for Godot, right? So this is useful to do when we're creating a Godot repository. Another thing that's useful to do is to give your code a license, okay? Now for our labs, the license doesn't particularly matter, right? It's just an assignment. But a license is really important to think about whenever you're creating a digital project, because your license is sort of your rights to ownership over your work, right? And if you don't specify a license, then there is no real protection for you legally if somebody comes along and looks at your code and copies it, right, and then sells it for $1 million, right? Lots of projects are free and open source, and the MIT license is a really good, easy, free and open source license. So I'm going to set that as the license for this repository. Again, you don't need to set a license. You can just leave this blank. But I encourage you, whenever you create a repository, to just take a minute and think about what sort of license you might want your project to have, right? Particularly if you're going to embark on any sort of commercial enterprise with software development, it's important for you to pick a good license. And similarly, right, for some commercial projects, you might want to set your repository visibility to private while you're keeping it sort of while you're developing your stuff, right? Okay, so with all that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead now and create my repository, right? So I'm going to click Create. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Move this out of the way because it's a little, things are a little busy at the moment. Okay, and we'll see that I have now successfully created my repository, right? And we can see that we have our README, which just has the description in it. We also have the license, right? Here is the MIT license itself. This is the open source MIT license. And this is also really important because this also provides you with protections, right? This is saying that the software that you have in this repository is provided as is without any warranty of any kind. And if anybody hurts themselves using your homework, they can't sue you, right? So in America, it's actually really important to have a license that gives you some sort of basic protection like that, because people can come along and say all sorts of crazy stuff without a good license. Okay, so so that is the sort of entry point to your repository, right? We have gone ahead and created this repository. We can also see the git ignore, right? These are some of these Godot specific files that we don't actually need to have as part of our tracked repository code, right? And so if we go back to the lab assignment, we will see, you're gonna see me flying around my computer a little bit here while I go and get everything up and running. Thanks for the patience. All right, here we are. Here is the labs. Here is lab 1. Okay, so lab 1, right? We want to create a GitHub repository with the Godot project inside it. Okay, so we've created our GitHub repository, but there's a couple of important things, right? For starters, we don't have any sort of Godot project, right? This is just a couple of random files. And secondly, this is actually not on our computer, right? This is all just currently in the website, github.com, right? In order to actually bring it onto our computer, this is where we have to start interacting with Git itself, okay? Now, there are many different ways to interact with Git repositories, okay? If you are comfortable using the command line, you're more than welcome to click this code button and then, just click, copy this URL and then go into your terminal, right? And you can write like git clone this repository, right? You can paste it and then we'll clone it and we copy it down to our computer. And you'll see that we have just added it right here, right? Here's our repository here in our folder, right? Now, I did that as sort of like a quick little shortcut for computer science kids, essentially, right? But if you just saw me do that and you're like, whoa, what the hell just happened? That all was so fast. The command line, that's scary. It's okay. There's actually a much more user-friendly way to interact with and clone GitHub repositories, and that is with the corresponding GitHub desktop app. Okay, so the next step in our sort of like software journey is we have to go download an application to help us get our repositories off the internet. So I'm going to go to GitHub desktop. Okay. And then you can just click this website, right? And you can see here on the website, it should give you the right operating system. You can just click this and install it like any other application, right? And then once you have done that, you should be able to launch it like any other application, right? So I'm just going to open up this app. Again, my computer is a little wacky. you know, it's maybe greener than most, I suppose, but it's just a computer. I just opened it up. I just opened up this application, and you should be able to open it up the same way, right? If you're on a Mac, you might just want to hit the apps folder. If you're on Windows, you can search for it with the Windows key, right? You just want to open up GitHub Desktop, right? Once you open up GitHub Desktop, you won't be greeted with this, right? I'm already logged into GitHub Desktop. You will need to log into GitHub Desktop. And it's really important that with GitHub Desktop, you log in with your corresponding GitHub account, right? You can kind of see, let's see, we click up here, or sort of, how do I get to the GitHub settings? Options. Try options. Repository settings? Where are the GitHub settings? That's funny. Maybe they are over here. No, these are like file settings. Okay. The point is, right up. You're right. You can kind of see down here too, right? You see my little my username and info, right? I have logged into GitHub Desktop, and I have logged in to my GitHub account, right? And once you have done that, you should kind of have like a blank slate here, and you might have a button up here. You kind of want to click up here and click on this Add button, and then you want to clone a repository, right? This is getting your repository from the internet, okay? You can also do that by going to, File, and then cloning repository, right? Once you have logged into GitHub Desktop, and you open up this clone repository dialog, you should just be able to search through your repositories to find it, and particularly if you are new to GitHub, it should appear right here. I'm just going to search for labs. My problem is I have a bunch of repositories because I do this all the time. Okay, here's the one that I just made, right? Intro to Video Game Design Lab Assignments. So you want to find your repository, and then this part's really important. You want to pick a place on your computer where you know you can go and find it, right? And everybody organizes things in different ways on their computers. Some people like to just put things on the desktop. Some people use the Documents folder. But you really want to keep track of where this folder is going to be cloned to on your computer. Because again, GitHub repositories, or Git repositories, are mainly just folders of files. And you need to keep track of where those folders of files live on your local computer, right? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go choose a folder. I'm going to go, this is my home folder. I'm going to go inside of my teaching folder, and I'll just leave it right here. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it inside my root teaching folder and hit select. So we can see it's going to get saved to my home folder, to me, to teaching, and it's going to get saved inside this folder called Intro to Video Game Lab Assignments, okay? And then I'm going to hit clone. And I have now cloned it to my computer, right? And if we've done that successfully, we should see this sort of gray area where it says there's no local changes, and we can click Show in File Manager. And if we do that, it should open up that folder in our computer, right? And what we can see is here is our folder, right? And here it is. Here's our repository of files. And as I said already, right, GitHub is really, and Git are really just methods of tracking changes on files, right? So if you edit any of these files or create any new files, we'll be able to synchronize them with the cloud, right? So for example, if I were to open up this README file with a text editor, do I have a normal text editor on my computer? Open with, God, let's see, there should be some sort of notepad. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show it to you this way, right? I'm gonna go and open up this this file. Come on, buddy. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's happening. Everything's happening. It's very exciting. Hello, did we get there? No. All right, I'm not used to doing these streams from my computer. There's a lot going on. So I will go to teaching. Okay, Here is my repository, right? Here's my file. I can now edit this file by adding some text to it, like, wow, I changed my repository, my repo, right? I can now save this, right? Save the file. I can quit. Now if I go back to GitHub desktop, it's where did it go? There should be a change here. What happened? Maybe I didn't save it correctly. That would be annoying because I'm trying to show you how easy this is. Oh my gosh. Let's try it one more time. Oh yeah, look at that. Didn't even save. So I'm going to edit this. Wow. I changed my file. This is a great reminder to always save your work, right? Always make sure you've saved your work. So now I'm going to save this. Oh my gosh. Great. Save. Okay, we've changed our file. And maybe GitHub is broken. What's happening? Oh, brother. Oh, yeah. Sorry. This is what you get for doing things tricky. Okay, as you noticed, this is not the right repository, right? This is from when I was being that cool coder a minute ago and showing the computer science kids how to do it. I'm going to delete this. Again, right? I'm going to go to the folder, go into teaching, lab assignments, open this up. Amazing. Okay, now something is definitely bustoed with GitHub. And it's probably because I am both streaming and using GitHub, so I'm just going to quit GitHub desktop. Right, can I quit you? Yeah, it's kind of locked up at the moment. Oh my gosh. I might have to cut this part out. Tragic. Okay, I'm going to pause and come back when I've fixed my computer. Apologies. Hang in there. Go get a snack. Take a snack break.